Welcome to the Williamsburg City Council work session of December 6th. Ms. Felica, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Mr. Maslin?
Here.
All right, so Mr. Trivett, do you have council preview for upcoming events?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. So we have 3 public hearings scheduled for Thursday. All of them are financial in nature. The first has to do with the appropriation of the ARPA funds that the city has received or plans to receive. Also, we have acceptance of additional grant funding for the Municipal Utility Assistance Grant from the state. And then finally, we have the allocation and disposition of the end-of-the-year surplus for the Williamsburg-James City County School District. And then, under new business, we have the presentation and acceptance of the annual comprehensive financial report. And then our final item will be the approval and authorization to sign the contract with Axon for our tasers and body cameras in the police department.
Excellent. Any questions for the city manager? All right, so next is the public comment portion of the meeting, which is an opportunity for anybody to come forward and talk to us about anything on their mind. Seeing none, we'll close that public comment period and move on to background presentations. And first, we have the presentation concerning the outcome of the 2021 Williamsburg Live events and preview for the 2022.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We're pleased today to welcome Scott Jackson and Rob Cross from Virginia Arts Festival to talk to us about Williamsburg Live, what happened last year, and what's going to happen this year.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, and council members. It's fantastic to be here. It's been a while. We thought we'd just give you a quick overview of what happened this past year, since most of you have seen those results. And we're excited that we're a lot further ahead because of some fortuitous ability to get artists scheduled earlier. So we're able to announce Williamsburg Live earlier than we've ever been able to do it before. So we were very proud of this past season. We were one of the first local multi-day festivals to be able to put something on this past year. Obviously, we were on a much smaller scale due to seating capacity, but we were still able to bring in some fantastic artists. I think the community was very grateful to be able to see things. We had a good turnout based on what our capacity was. Just to give you some context, the prior year we were at 6,400. We did 2,000 over the 3 nights. And again, we just want to give you some context. 387 of those patrons were out-of-town ticket buyers. We did have visitors from 22 different states and Washington, D.C., which I find remarkable. I think people were looking to be able to do something, do some traveling. This is where visitors came from this past year. And then I know it's always important to council to see from within the region where people are buying tickets from. So here, from our ticket master, our box office report, we can see this. We're able to track by zip code. Marketing plan, we stayed a little bit more regional this year in terms of greater Hampton Roads and kind of that 3 to 5 hour drive time for obvious reasons. Still got a fantastic amount of publicity for the festival. Again, I think people were excited to welcome back events to Hampton Roads. And got really good press coverage this past year. And we can give you more details on any of that, but I really want to focus more on what's coming up for this past year. I'm going to ask Scott Jackson, who's the general manager of the festival, and the education department reports to him. We had a very vibrant education year. The schools were really looking for content. So, Scott?
Sure. As you know, a really important part of what we do as an arts festival is reach students. I think the public is very excited about the world-class artists we bring in, but we feel like if we're bringing in world-class artists, it's really important to us that they're making a difference for our students. So in a typical year, that's normally defined by in-school performances where we bring artists into public schools, but also student matinees where schools can take a field trip to see a show. Neither of those were feasible the past year, so we focused on virtual residencies. So we had 4 fantastic ensembles that represented different types of performing arts, from string quartets to brass to woodwinds, and then also storytelling and Broadway. And we had each of them do a special, about a 45-minute presentation virtually, and then accompanied that, that 45-minute presentation was tied into the state standards of learning, and then accompanied that with a Zoom interactive portion for students and teachers. So that was made available to all of the Williamsburg, James City County schools, and that also came with viewing guides which tied into the history of the performances, the composers and the music, and also, again, the standards of learning. So that was very successful last year. I can say that long-term, in our heart and soul, we're a live performing arts organization, so we want to get back to presenting artists. We believe in the spring we can do that. I think the most likely scenario would be having some artists go into schools. I think field trips are still a really tough lift for the time being, so we're going to really focus on similar type of programs, but actually having the artists go into the schools this coming year.
We also have been doing a lot of research to find out how this is affecting other arts organizations and our peer organizations around the country. And so we've included some information in your packet that we thought would be valuable for council in terms of ticket sale trends, people's propensity to travel. What we're finding is some of the legs of the festival for us are government support, individual donations, whether that's corporate sponsors, foundations, or individual donors, and then obviously ticket sales. Over this last year and a half, government support has held up very well for the festival. We were fortunate, as most arts organizations were, to receive PPP funding and the SVOG funding. Then our corporate sponsorships, people were still pretty generous to us, and most of them carried over or continued their sponsorships. Where everyone is still struggling is ticket sales. There was a pretty big uptick in the middle of the summer as people were starting to sell their season tickets for the fall. And then when the Delta variant hit, they just kind of came to a screeching halt again. So most arts organizations right now are at about 32% of their ticket sales of what they were for the fall of 2019, is used that as a comparison, which is still, I mean, that's a pretty big piece of revenue for major arts organizations. We're hoping by spring that starts, and as we're starting to do more outdoor events, that will start trending back up again. Donations, I mentioned donations from individual donors has really held up really well for us. People have been particularly generous because I think they want the arts organizations to be able to make it through this period. We're really excited. This is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the earliest we've ever been able to announce Williamsburg Live. As you know, Jason Isbell carried over because he was supposed to be here in 2020, rolled over to 2021, which didn't happen. And then he was able to continue roll the contract over to this year. Then we were able to confirm Andy Moore for Friday night. Amazing Grammy nominated artist, also a big TV film star. So she'll be a Friday night. I mentioned Jason will be Saturday night. And then Sunday, Martina McBride confirmed. So we've announced 3-day packages. Sales are going really, really well. And then we'll go on sale with single tickets after the first of the year. We'll go back to our normal footprint as we were pre-pandemic, using the entire space. Also, really excited. More details will follow, but we've been renting the tent every year for the festival, and we've actually, a donor stepped up and we were actually buying a tent so that we'll own it for the future. And be able to use it here and some other locations where we've been having to rent tents. It's really spectacular, and we'll be able to start sharing some of those drawings with you soon. It's under construction as we speak. And we've already have ticket buyers from these states for this coming year, so that's always a good sign with it this far out. People are looking to make travel plans for the spring. And then before the last thing, is there anybody have any questions for Scott or I? I want to share one other piece of information with you. I'm happy to answer questions, and if I don't have the answer, we'll try to go find it and bring it back to you.
So we'll let you go ahead and finish presentations, okay. Then we'll come back to council.
We're really excited as we continue to grow our partnership with City of Williamsburg and Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. We need more help, and so we're adding a staff person to the staff, John Martin. John's with us here. John, say hello. Decades-long experience in managing venues and managing arts organizations and being a tour manager for major artists. He lives here in Williamsburg, so he joined the staff about a month ago. So we'll have somebody here in the community all the time that can help start joining in on more of the civic activities and have the festival have a year-round presence up here. So Scott and I will still stay as involved as we've been, but we now have some boots on the ground here in Williamsburg. So I hope you'll welcome John and reach out to him and make him part of the family here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to both of you, and welcome, Mr. Martin. It's glad to see some folks involved in this, but obviously the 2020 numbers weren't anything like 2019, but that's certainly of no fault of the acts that were there or your efforts to bring folks. It's the pandemic, and it's the root cause of everything bad, I think. But I'm really excited about the lineup for next year. Those are some heavy-hitting names, yeah. and I would anticipate, and I think you talked briefly about it by some of the pre-ticket sales already, we'll see those numbers bounce back. So I'm really excited about that and happy for this continued relationship that we have with you all. So thank you for making Williamsburg a place to be.
Thank you. We appreciate it. It's obviously one of our most important partnerships, and we couldn't do it without your support and the support from the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And so we want to keep making it better every year, and we're always open for suggestions and guidance. I will point out one thing that our fault. We misspelled John's name. It's J-O-N. There's no H. So I apologize. It's right on his business cards, but it's not right on this presentation. So
he's still John Martin. So. Mr. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Yeah, thank you for the update and looking forward to the 2022 season. And really commend you for pushing through and bringing the event, even at we were hoping the tail end of a pandemic. Obviously, as you mentioned, the different variants out there now may have some additional impact, but to me, in looking at the presentation, it was amazing you were still able to get those numbers from locals when it went down from over 3,000 out of town to 387. So I commend all of you and all of your staff for, as the mayor mentioned, bringing some great acts and looking forward to 2022. So hopefully, as those numbers continue to grow, we'll start to see those out-of-town numbers increase back to where they were in previous years.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Do you have any indication of how you convert the out-of-town ticket sales into hotel nights?
We do. In the past, we've tracked that pretty closely. So I don't, off the top of my head, for the year that just ended, I don't know that I could give you that information, but we have very detailed information for 2019 for where people came from, how many nights they stayed. So I'm happy to.
And then maybe coming up for this next season with.
Absolutely, we'll track it the same way.
Yeah. So the other question was, if you need any help in terms of storing your big tent when you're not using it, Chief Snyder might have some ideas for you.
Careful what you offer.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. We went to hear Chris Teal, and he gave a fantastic performance. I think he was as excited to be there as we were because it was right when live acts were opening. So
I think that was one of his first
I think
live
it was
performances.
too. Yeah. So a couple questions. You mentioned about the educational component. Do you anticipate doing like a hybrid in the future as far as some live, some virtual?
I think the answer is yes. I think the good thing is, having done it last year was the first time we'd ever put together a virtual slate of offerings, so we now have some lessons learned. We have a blueprint. But our first option, our first focus is going to be live things, but I do think for this spring, we'll probably have to be hybrid. And again, I think the in-schools are going to have, they're going to be more useful for the schools than student matinees. I know it's always the things you don't expect, but I think busing is a real big challenge. Mm-hmm. So that trying to have a big student matinee is not going to work as well as essentially us coming to them. So our top focus will be putting together some in-school offerings and then supplement that with virtual offerings. For example, we have a long-time relationship with Dance Theater of Harlem. They're working with us for a spring virtual option for students throughout the region where they'll get to participate, observe a rehearsal, and again, have interaction with some of the dancers. So we will definitely try to have both in school and virtual.
Yeah, and some of the events that I've been involved with, you can actually improve the experience by being able to offer access to, like you say, rehearsals and conversations with individuals. So that's good. And so I noticed on the little map that it looks like you're going into the parking lot is across the street, which is, if it is, well, the parking lot. So I was just sort of curious about your jut in there. It's now
So-
paved.
Trying to get my, okay. So historically, and I might actually need some help on this, historically across the street is where we've put the restrooms and stuff, and I know there's been a lot of construction there. The upper right-hand corner, which I know now is where the excavation is going, that space is not available to us anymore. So we're trying to juggle the footprint for parking, artist buses and trucks, and where we put the restrooms. So we're working, we've had several meetings with the city as we start looking at the footprint after the construction.
I think the key piece is for many years we had closed Francis Street, and that had been an opportunity for us to put food vendors and merchandise and so on. Last year, we didn't close it, but this year we'll close it again. So I think the key thing is we'll be back to that larger footprint. We may not have gotten those purple lines perfectly, but we'll be back to what you're used to in terms of a bigger footprint and also more room for vendors.
And that was one of my questions too, which you just answered as to whether Francis Street would be closed. So I'm glad to hear that. And then Mr. Maslin touched on overnight visitation. Do you all work with any of the hotels for packages?
Yes, so we sit down with Visit Williamsburg, and then also with the hotels and design 2-night packages and 3-night packages.
Good. And with Mr. Martin being here in Williamsburg, do you foresee him being able to work on perhaps some other Virginia Arts Festival events here in Williamsburg?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, because that's been one of the big questions and I guess interest is that, I mean, I've been to Norfolk for a few things, but it'd be really great having more of your events on this side of the water.
Absolutely. I mean, the tent gives us some more options also, now that we own it. And then we've been doing some holiday programming up here the last couple of years, and it's been really, really successful. Obviously, we didn't do it last year. We are again this year, and we have some bigger stuff planned for December of '22. Yeah, is that near the end?
Yeah.
And we do,
Oh,
on a regular
okay.
basis, like we help produce provided the music for the tree lighting a couple weekends ago. So CW pulls us in on a pretty regular basis, helping produce the entertainment part of some of their events.
Good. Well, that's great to know. Thank you.
Rob and Scott, thank you very much for the presentation, and John, congratulations on joining Williamsburg Live, and we're excited to have you in the area here. I counted, I think, 16 states already represented in the pre-ticket sales, so that's exciting because it looked like the year before was 22. So we're getting close without even the tickets officially being on sale yet. I'm very excited to have the 2022 version a little bit bigger than it was last year. It was still a nice affair, but it'll be great to see so many folks come back. To Councilman Maslin and Councilwoman Ramsey's point, they asked about hotels, and I was curious, one of the goals that we have in a downtown vibrancy study that we've run is the core of Williamsburg is really the city center, and people like to traverse Dog Street and see the restaurants that we might have there in our downtown area. And one of the things our vibrancy study is attempting to do is to draw people a little bit farther into the city, whether it might be down Prince George Street or farther down Scotland Street to some of the restaurants that are around. So with some of the collaboration that you have with local hotels, how do you approach the restaurant community, or do you have any contact with the Williamsburg Area Restaurant Association in trying to come up with packages or at least maps where some people could grab a bite between shows?
I know that our Director of Tourism and Marketing meets regularly with Visit Williamsburg, and I believe and we can find out more information, but I do think that there's conversations of, if we're getting them here for 2 or 3 days, what are the other things they're doing here? Because obviously they're only going to get food from us when the venue's open. So we're always looking to try to explore that and work with the local partners to help the business spread out.
Sure. Well, that may be a good way to introduce them to restaurants they
Yeah.
didn't try last time. The 2019 Williamsburg Live mentioned a number of attendees from different countries. Have there been any pre-ticket sales from other countries?
Not
just
that I
yet?
know of.
Okay. I'm sure that comes a little bit later, but I was
Yeah.
just curious to there.
Challenges, you look at other parts of the festival, sadly, we're already starting to get cancellation of artists because they can't get visas or their quarantine requirement when they return, they just can't afford to put their company up for, a week to 3 weeks. We had an artist coming from Hong Kong this year, as an example, and if they got a visa to come, but when they return, they would have to quarantine for 3 weeks. So they'd have to put up the entire company, pay their salaries and their per diem for 3 weeks, and the artists can't afford to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how it affects visitation for ticket buyers by spring.
Great. Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing some of those numbers.
Yeah.
Those are all my questions. Thank you both.
Good, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so
again.
much for your time.
Appreciate you all coming forward, and welcome, John, and looking forward to a successful 2022.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that takes us to item B, presentation by staff of the midterm progress towards completion of the 2021-22 goals, initiatives, and outcomes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So today we thought we would walk you through where we are in terms of progress on your GIO list that we constructed as a part of our GIO retreat about a year ago now. And so at the midterm, we've still got a year left to complete the work schedule. And, the progress of the GIOs is really about setting a work plan for the city for 2 years. And we've been doing this a little bit differently in the last little bit. We've been focusing on having less actual action items that have higher impact. And that's evident in the fact that this year we redid our vision statement and the corresponding goals so that we now only have 6 goals. In those 6 goals, we identified 38 action items. The staff then takes those action items and decides how best to implement the vision that represents. And that process resulted in 291 steps so far. And of course, as we go through the process, we add to and continue to move those targets around to make sure that we're accomplishing the ends that you all have set. Of those 291 steps at the midterm, 65 have no progress, 78 are in progress, and 148 of them are completed. And that results in a completion rate of about 64%, which is a little bit ahead of where we were this time 2 years ago. So I'm feeling pretty good about where we are and excited about the fact that we still have a year to continue to work on some of these big ticket items and move these action items forward. What we thought we would do today is go through a list of some of the items that we think are important, some of the ones that we've made progress on and still have some progress to make, and then, of course, answer any questions from City Council. Mark?
All right, well, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. What you're looking at here, the way we thought we would, and I believe we did this the last time, this is the newest version of the dashboards. We're going to use as you're all well aware, on the left-hand side, we break it down by major goal area, and then underneath of it, we have a kind of a narrative textual area that explains why this matters. Then we have a section called What Are We Doing About It? And that's where we really get into the meat of the initiatives, and then how satisfied are the residents is the resident satisfaction survey piece. We're going to, when this process is complete, we're adding a 4th component that's going to be how much does it cost? And that's going to really show the total amount of money that is allocated to achieve One Williamsburg as an example, but then further break it down by individual initiatives. So that'll be coming as soon as we launch the new dashboards here in hopefully January is what we're on track for right now. So we're going to use this, and I'm just going to call on the folks that are going to give this update, and they'll give your update, and then we'll just move on. You can have answer, they can ask, or you can ask any questions, they can answer them as we need to. So the first is Michelle, and Michelle's going to talk about Heritage Trail.
Sure. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mayor and members of council. I want to talk about Heritage Trail Development, which is an initiative under your first goal of One Williamsburg. Before I do that, I thought maybe we could show, Mark, if you did a back arrow on.
Oh. Where do
So
wanna
you
go?
can, at your leisure, you can look at all 7. It looks like there's 7 initiatives under One Williamsburg. So here's the overview of them all. And you can see yellow's in progress, green means it's finished. And as you right-click through those is where you get the detail steps. So to kind of orient you on what you're seeing. And Mark will be updating these every month for you. So as we're working with our project management system, which is tackling those steps to get each of these projects done, we will be updating it. And then at the end of each month, Mark will load it to the website so you and all of the public can see where we are on each of your initiatives. So with that background, we'll dive into, wanted to talk about our Heritage Trail Development Initiative, a really exciting initiative to develop an African-American heritage trail in the city. So we've made quite a bit of progress on this, and you'll see the last step is to provide you a recommendation. So today is a little sneak peek at where we are, and with the aim of looking for a federal grant. So we hope in January to submit a federal grant to the U.S. Economic Development Administration for a tourism grant to help build. This is a costly project to do correctly and do really nicely. So that's where we are. So leading up to that grant application, we've created a GIS story, and Mark is going to pull that over so I can actually show you the thinking along the line. So we've developed it's 1.99 mile trail, so a 2-mile trail. When we started this, it was about 5 miles long, and that's just too long for someone to do a walking trail. So you can see, if you zoomed in on this map or zoomed out, you can see sites of interest that people may want to see outside of the trail, but the actual trail is here. And those brown icons are places of interest that will actually be recognized with a plaque and an explanation, both physically on the ground or in, next to the space, and also in a virtual world app like this one. And I'm just going to highlight the first one, which is right on top of the word Williamsburg. That's where we'd like to build the trailhead for this trail and turn that into a civil rights memorial. We don't have a civil rights memorial in Williamsburg, and the city has this land, and this could be a gorgeous contemplative place to really think about civil rights and, since 1619, but also particularly the 20th century, where the whole world, or the whole country, experienced events around civil rights. Martin Luther King Jr. actually visited Williamsburg, so we want to talk about that. And then you can see as the trail moves forward some other things we want to talk about. So that's a glimpse of where we are. Wish us luck on that grant application, and we'll bring more detail to you in the future.
So, wants to ask questions of,
Sure, happy to answer any questions.
any questions? Yeah.
The trailhead, the path towards closer to the First Baptist Church area, I can't tell, is that going behind the Harriet Tubman neighborhood?
I didn't hear that last part.
Yes, it is.
The trail, so it
Yeah,
will
the
start with a
city-
grassy trail then?
There's a couple reasons that we selected this site as a good place to start the trail. Number one, and probably paramount, is the fact that it's directly adjacent to the municipal complex, which means there's parking for people to park and then get out and walk across the street. The other reason is because the city actually owns a piece of property right there at the corner. It's sort of, I think it's particularly nice. It's got large pine trees on it. It's a great setting for something to happen. And then the housing authority actually owns the connective tissue to that property along where the blue line is,
Right.
all the way back to what is the blatant property. And so it gives us an opportunity to do something with the trail that we can't do anywhere else on its route, which is to have sort of this nature environment, as Michelle said, contemplative space, where we might be able to do some meandering and take our time to tell the story of those neighborhoods before we get to the trail proper, which would use mostly urban sidewalks.
Okay, sure, that sounds great. It was just interesting to see it off the road there, as long as it wouldn't be changed at all through the rebuild that we might do in the Blayton property. That's a very unique way to start the trail. That was my one question. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so next, we're gonna go out of One Williamsburg, and we're going to go into Courageously Leading. And this one is going to be me, and it's going to be an update on performance measurement, and you're kind of getting a sneak peek at it right now. Just kind of the differences between the current version that you're looking at and the existing version. At the top, you have the performance summary section where it gives you an overview of each individual goal area, where they're in terms of status, how many are in progress, there's no progress, or it's completed. What we're going to do with this is we're going to add a page before this, because we did change the vision of the city this year along with the GIOs. We're going to add a section that kind of explains that, kind of walks people through the vision and what we're hoping to accomplish. And then obviously going from 8 down to 6 really shrinks this down. We're still going to have the monthly operating reports. That'll all still be here. So organizationally, it's still going to look the same. The biggest thing, so now that all the department heads have kind of gone through, and we're kind of going through a quality control type process to make sure that the narratives are what we want them to be, the data is correct, it's pointing to the right data, pictures are there, we're using resident satisfaction where that's appropriate. But the biggest part for me is going to be when we add in this budgetary information. So now it's really going to kind of close that loop in terms of, courageously leading, what is it? Why does it matter? What are we doing about it? This is what council said. This is what we're doing about it. The residents are satisfied. And then ultimately, how much does it cost? And being able to break that down, not only by goal, but by initiative, I think is going to be a really powerful tool that I expect we're going to have in place, hopefully around March timeframe. Any questions on performance measurement?
So just in terms, that's great in terms of adding the cost component. And this might not be appropriate for all the GIOs, but can we take at least one of them and start talking about maybe where there's a return? And maybe we can have some information on that.
In terms of a return on investment?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
And I mean, it's not all going to be quantitative, but
sure.
I think sort of with that messaging would be helpful.
Absolutely. There's a lot we can do with this. There's a lot that we've done with it, but there's significantly more that we can do with it. So in terms of showing those returns, in terms of mapping and where, how different types of programs affect different parts of the city, and overlaying all kinds of different census data as an example. It's a significant amount of work we can do with this.
Thank you.
I would just point out that return on investment is very different for a city, as you know, than a Fortune 500 company who measures their financial statement and their bottom line. But we certainly have talked about ways, like Mark said, of showing heat maps and showing where services are going, making sure all residents in all areas of the city are getting those services. So we're really excited.
Taking an economic development approach to some of them, where we're looking at the multiplier effect that, helps us in that response.
Sure. We can certainly, this is a great storytelling platform. We can certainly use it to tell stories very easily. So the next one we're going to talk about is the parking study. That's, again, going to be me. I think we're all well aware of where we're at on parking. We've been doing this for quite some time. We've gone out and Drew and I and the police chief have done visits to DC and seen systems in place. Based on all of that and the way in which we see parking going in terms of implementing the parking study, and then based on guidance from City Council, we have selected a parking vendor. Certainly there's no contract in place yet. That contract I would expect to be in front of you this next month. And then once that's done, then it's going to be down to implementing. That's kind of where we're at with parking.
Yeah, this is one of those projects that could have, 48 steps underneath that title. And so we've been taking it in pieces. This next piece is to implement the concept, the technology components that we talked about back in 2017 as part of the parking study. Sensors in the ground to give us a better idea of occupancy, but also the technology now exists for us to give a more convenient process for our residents and our visitors to use that parking system. And so we're excited about what that means. Over the next month, we're going to be working on some public awareness pieces to talk about where we're going with this new system. Our plan is to do that in advance of you all considering the contract so that we can begin to have a community conversation about what the plan is and get some feedback before we take what is a pretty significant step in terms of purchasing and deploying a new software and hardware component.
Mr. Trivett, would it be possible, since this has been out there for such a long time, to get that last presentation that you provided to council on the parking study so we could look through it again just to,
Sure.
in our own mind, refresh our minds on the whole parking study before we get to a contract?
Sure,
portion
yeah,
of it?
absolutely.
Maybe eliminate some of the questions.
Yeah, one of the things that Mr. Maslin suggested today was that we go through that presentation again. So what we might do is schedule that for the work session in January and then have the contract on your agenda for the business meeting in January if you're comfortable in taking that step. We probably will save ourselves a little bit of time and not go through that whole because if you remember, it was about 2.5 hours long. Maybe we can pull out some of the juicier bits about where we're going and what needs to be done and sort of refresh everybody's memory about why we're on this path. I don't really think a whole lot has changed in terms of the parking circumstance. I think that the findings of that study are still valid. I think their recommendations are still valid. And we've been making significant progress towards some of the things that they asked us to do. I personally feel like one of the big steps that we made progress on this year, and we're still making progress on, is their recommendation to consolidate management and operation of the parking lots downtown. They really felt like that was important in terms of creating a much more convenient feeling for the user, no guessing as to who is responsible, and one entity to set rates and policy. And so we took a major step forward in that regard with Colonial Williamsburg. The city now has a lease for all of their surface lots downtown. We're talking about something similar with William and Mary. So there's a real chance that by the time we get to implementing this next phase, there will be one operator for parking in Williamsburg, and that'll be a satisfying result, I think, for the users.
Thank you.
And while we've made a lot of progress in some of these items that you've mentioned, the big thing that we can't make progress on is that turnover in the downtown area where people are parking for extended period of times that aren't there to shop or dine. They're either students or they're employees at the university, and so I think part of what we're trying to do is make parking available for commerce to happen downtown, and that's a big part of the next step, or some of the next steps.
Now, the goal that the city council agreed to was to try to operate our parking system that there was at least one space open on every block at all times. And in order to do that, we have to get to a higher turnover. We took a major step forward in that in terms of deploying our ambassadors. We went from one parking enforcement officer who was part-time to 4 part-time parking enforcement officers that we call ambassadors. They've done a great job in enforcing the regulations in terms of time limits, but it's still very difficult for us to track turnover. And so this next step allows us to do that and really monitor progress, but also do directed enforcement so that we're not really wasting resources patrolling for parking violations.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I agree with those comments, and that's great. I think the parking study was over 100 pages long, and it was done like 3 city councils ago. And we've seen some changes for the better. Colonial Williamsburg's done a great job in terms of upgrading their parking lots. They're offering the 2-hour free parking and pay for extended. So that may change the dynamics a little bit, but people actually pay to stay there longer than when the study was done. The other thing from a technology standpoint, do we have the ability to link data from finance in terms of the residents and their license plate numbers to our parking system if we wanted to sort of offer our residents some type of discount?
So I think the
New system, yes.
the new system that's one of the things that Drew and I have been working on with them is essentially the idea or the concept of a smart tag that you would buy, as a resident, you would buy that, and that would be associated with your house. And in certain situations, or I guess maybe tiering, whether there's a lot to work out there. If you were allowed to park in front of your house because this was in your vehicle, but you're also allowed to go downtown and park because it has a credit card tied to it. So for the resident, parking becomes seamless in terms of paying for that transaction.
It's sort of like that old infomercial that came on late at night, set it and forget it. That's what we're after with parking. You set it up one time, and then you don't have to mess with it again unless your credit card expires or you get a new card. And the convenience is really that there's one permit regardless of where you park. That's what we're shooting for. If you are a William & Mary user, if you live in a residential parking location downtown, and then you visit downtown, that one permit will control where you can park and also handle any payment that might be due everywhere you park. So really looking for that element of convenience.
And I know we still have some residents out there that don't realize how easy it is to put the credit card on file with the Department of Finance on our website, and then they can go in and out of the parking structure, don't have to do anything else. It'll read their license plate. It's very easy.
Right. This essentially takes that to the next step, because the issue is having in front of your house, and especially if you live in a residential area that requires parking, this makes it seamless no matter where if you want to park in a Colonial Williamsburg lot, the parking garage, wherever. Right now, we're limited to the LPR cameras in the garage, but this removes all of those barriers and makes it seamless for the resident.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go on to innovating a modern city. We're going to talk about Capitol Landing Road, if my mouse will move. And then Mr. Small. Do it. There we go. Not the best.
That's you, Aaron.
Well, as you can see, we're kind of in that stage in the middle of engineering design and VDOT and federal review process, which is kind of a long, drawn-out end date projected through July of 2023. So this is kind of a long task. And so what I did is I put together a quick PowerPoint, a couple slides just to kind of walk you through just a couple of the changes. As you can see on the left, we've got the, if you recall from the visioning session, the menu of items of how we're going to proceed through this project. The graphic that you see in the upper right is option 1A, which was the option you chose last summer. And right after we held our month-long virtual stakeholder survey. So down in the lower right is kind of a little more detailed plan. And this is just one portion of the area. This happens to be the area between like Woods Drive up to the Virginia Power right-of-way. But it kind of shows some of the details and some of the notes on how we are going to proceed to the first phase of the first course, which is our scoping meeting. So we've kind of defined, this is kind of the more detailed phase of the project and the whole scope of work of the project, as well as costs. Our next thing that we will do is hold a scoping meeting with the VDOT officials, and that's actually scheduled for this Thursday. And then once we meet with them and get through that process, we will follow that up with our 30% plan submittal. And then submission of our NEPA document, which is our draft environmental document. That'll actually occur a week later on December 17th of 21. And then the next thing we will do is we'll start working through the second course, which is the 60% utility relocations. That'll occur sometime between January 2021 is when that starts, and that'll go to August of 23. Right-of-way acquisitions will be from June 2022 to January of 2023. Utility relocations, January 23 to August 23. Then we'll start on our third course, which will get us through kind of the last little bit of design and approvals and advertisement for construction. Now, granted, utility relocations is actually going to be a construction phase. where the utility companies will come out and start relocating and undergrounding the lines. So there is some construction before what we call our road construction. And the third course is really the road construction phase. So that'll start to occur sometime around January 23 up to about August. We anticipate advertising the project for contractors in March of 2023. And then the major road construction would start in August and continue through September of 2024. So that's kind of and that's the dessert phase. So it's kind of a long, drawn-out meal. So just be aware that this is the price we pay for using the federal dollars that we get. Next slide, please. The other portion of this that I wanted to kind of bring in is the Capitol Landing Road bypass road intersection. And what it is we just received approval to reconfigure that. Originally, we had it teeing bypass road into kind of Capitol Landing and Page with a signalized intersection. We just received approval to reconfigure that so that we can allow for the fourth leg to go into the visitor center. So Capitol Landing Road will now tee into the through road will be bypass and that small section of Capitol Landing into Page Street. And that actually makes more sense from a traffic standpoint because the through road of bypass is US Route 60, and that'll continue on to US Route 60 south of that. So this is the proposed configuration with a traffic signal at that location. We're proposing that the design is getting ready to start. That'll start soon. We've got to get some paperwork done before we can get the consultant started, but we're basically planning a parallel schedule with our Capitol Landing Road corridor improvements so that we're hoping to accelerate the intersection so that they're basically going out to bid at the same time and finishing at the same time. And this is kind of just a concept sketch, no real details other than this is roughly what it's supposed to look like. And that's the Capitol Landing Road, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
And I'm sorry, Aaron, I missed, when would you anticipate completion of this Capitol Landing Road bypass road?
The intersection, we're hoping to put it in conjunction with the other, so we're hoping construction will be around the same time, which is kind of the August of 2023 to September of 24 phase. You have to recognize, we still have to go through all of those preliminary approvals, just like we did on a lot of our other federal projects.
And Mr. Trivett, remind me, we have federal dollars committed this, but we've already committed money to this project as well.
Right, there's a shared cost, and so we've got a little bit of local money involved as well.
And then it's going to take additional money as the project moves forward?
We don't think so. The budget that we've developed includes both shares, the federal funds and the local funds. The local funds are primarily spent on underground wiring and things that the federal dollars can't be used for.
So that's where I was going with that is so what we have committed to it now is enough to do the underground
Yes.
wiring that we, okay.
Yeah, we're optimistic that when this project goes out to bid, it'll actually come in a little under than what we've budgeted.
Okay.
Right, let me just clarify, the last of the phased dollars to finish out fully fund the project is the local funds that are that'll be up for the 2023 budget.
Okay. Thank you.
So continuing the conversation on budget and schedule, seeing what's happening with the supply chain issues, the labor issues, and then forecasting all these dollars that are going to be coming down from the federal government for infrastructure projects, and the contractors you're probably working with are larger than we typically work with, right? Any idea in terms of how do we get ahead of that curve in terms of getting the interest from the contractors that we need to keep our schedule and budget?
Right now, there's a lot of things that we work through our VDOT process on making sure that we've got adequate contingencies, as well as making sure that, I mean, this is one thing about the long drawn-out process you could do is you can at least guarantee I can generate a lot more interest because I'll know here it comes out and the bids will be due on these particular dates. And so we don't anticipate, the biggest thing that we're looking at as far as long-term, drawn-out stuff that would draw out a schedule would be actually the signals infrastructure. And that's about the only other thing, and that's actually on the intersection project.
In addition, I think the fact that we're to this point gives us an advantage, because any project that gets funded through some subsequent federal action or the infrastructure bill is going to have to catch up going through that same rigorous process of federal design standards that we're already to the point of doing 30% drawings and 60% drawings for. So I think we're already ahead of the curve.
That's good. And maybe Mark can stockpile those microchips for the signals. So, thank you.
No questions.
I've none. Thank you, Mr. Smalls.
Thank you.
Particularly excited about that. This is a big
Yes.
project, and I mean, it's really going to be, I think, turn to fade, just a game changer for Capitol Landing Road with all of that that's going on at the visitor center, and I really see that enhancing traffic flows and trying to get more cars there. We'll see some redevelopment of some of the older properties there. So this is exciting.
All right, so next we're going to move over into innovating a modern city. Actually, we're already there. We're going to talk about ARB regulations, and Aaron Burke is going to talk about that.
Hey there.
Good afternoon. This is one of those projects that does have about 48 steps in it.
It's got a lot.
We've been talking about this for a while. We started this pre-pandemic in February of 2020, and things kind of ground to a halt there for a number of months because we weren't able to meet in person, and the board recognized the importance of being able to ensure that we had adequate public input during the process. So we've moved forward. We've had a number of work sessions. We did a material review. The board has made some changes to both approved materials and the addition of some new colors to the palettes. We are slated to hold another work session next Monday evening at 6 o'clock in this room to kind of finish reviewing the last 6 chapters or so, and they are in draft 4 and 5 and 6 stages right now to make sure we've crossed all our T's and dotted all our I's. We've talked about this almost as much as we talked about the comprehensive plan. I don't think we've had as many work sessions. But with that, at the end of that meeting, the board will have seen all of the chapters and getting close to some semblance of a final format. Staff will go back and make any corrections that they have. And we hope to be able to bring it to City Council for a public hearing, of course, after design review, after the ARB does a public hearing and Planning Commission does a public hearing, sometime in early spring, probably April or May. But I know that there's been a conversation about holding a joint work session with the City Council between now and then the board's certainly open to that. It may be great to do it after we get these last few chapters done, and then we have a final draft document for everybody to kind of digest a little bit. But I'm available if you have any questions specifically about any of the chapters or where we stand in progress.
And I think, one of the things that we wanted to do moving into that joint meeting is to make sure that it's as productive as it can be. And so, we've talked a little bit internally about how to accomplish the flexibility that I think the City Council has asked for. And the planning staff has done a fantastic job of coming up with a good plan for that. And so I think over the next few months, I'll sit down with each one of you and talk about what that means and talk about how it works in each one of the districts so that you can start thinking about whether or not we are as close to the goal that you wanted to set for flexibility or not, and then provide that feedback to the ARB so that when we go to the joint meeting, there's a clear path for what the agenda needs to be and what the discussion items should be so that we can produce a product that the City Council supports.
One of the kind of questions we've had come up recently, and I think council is aware, is the question about sign colors. And signs are on the agenda for next week. We're in about, I think, draft maybe 3 or 4 of that chapter, but the board is aware of those questions as well. And we've actually already made a couple of notes to make some additional changes to colors, so I think that will be a pretty thorough discussion at that meeting.
But I'm certainly looking forward to the conversation about products and materials. I think we're at a point where we can make some smart alterations to our guidelines. So looking forward to that conversation.
I have a quick follow-up, actually, for Mark. I'm so excited about being able to track where we are in some of our GIO progresses, and I understand the reason for using the website today was to show the public that this is public information. Where's the best way to navigate to the dashboard for my sidewalk from the probably more familiar just city website?
Sure, so
Because
if you go to
there's a
the
couple
main
different
city website, I will tell you that the current version is the one that's there now. This is the new version we hopefully will debut next month. But right on the front of the website is a button, one of the 5 or 6 buttons across. I forget what the name of it is, but
Open government.
Open Government.
Okay.
That's, if you click Open
Sort
Government.
of right in the middle underneath the video that plays.
Yeah. And that'll take you right to the dashboard.
Okay, that's neat. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that we'll talk about this more next month when we present the new dashboard to you is the dashboard that you see here is the front end of another software that we actually use to track progress. And Michelle is now our master of that software. And it's sort of her assignment to figure out all the things that it will do that we're not taking advantage of. And there's a lot of that. And as we get more involved in using that software, that will become more a part of what you see on the website. But we'll talk more about that next month.
Okay, yeah, having a prominent space for it would be great, just so people know it's right there. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to move on to prioritizing safety and wellness. We're going to talk about mobile integrated health, and Sierra's going to talk about that.
Welcome, Sierra.
Thank you. Okay, so as many of you guys know, we officially began mobile integrated healthcare in 2018 under Chief Dent, actually, but it was only recently approved by council to have a full-time person assigned to that position, which is what prompted my promotion effective January of this year. Since then, we have expanded the mobile integrated healthcare program quite significantly. In fact, we've increased our client enrollment 72%. We have also been able to develop and launch a congestive heart failure pilot program with Riverside Doctors Hospital and their cardiology team, which is located on Bullifonts Boulevard. We, in that program, aim to improve quality of life and health outcomes for our congestive heart failure patients. And one of the major goals is also to help reduce readmissions for the healthcare systems, as there are multiple penalties and fines associated with that. This program has had great success. I'd like to share one of our patients with you. He is a local resident here who, when I first met him, he was declining rapidly mentally and physically. He was wheelchair bound and had just been released from the hospital where he was admitted for a period of about a week. When he came home, I saw him within 72 hours, immediately started consulting with the cardiologist team and getting his medications modified. When I came back to see him around day 7, he was up, walking around, he was making his bed, and he was cracking jokes. So he has since graduated from the program in about 30 days, but he's just one example of how drastically getting somebody in the home, educating and helping them manage their disease process can rapidly change their outcomes. Also, one figure we've kind of estimated associated with this heart failure program since we launched it about September, we are estimating about $90,000 worth of cost savings. And then last couple bullet points up here, we continue to develop the program by engaging with our partners. So Colonial Behavioral Health is a major part of mobile integrated health, as we have a lot of psychiatric or behavioral health patients that we are coming into contact with. So they'll be attending our meetings for mobile integrated health starting next week. And then finally, as we move to expand the mobile integrated healthcare program, we are reaching out to schedule a retreat, which will be oriented at evaluating our progress and future goals. And also kind of around the same time in January, we'll be going live with our new software called ESO, which will allow us to better be able to track our encounters with mobile integrated healthcare, which right now I'm kind of doing through all Microsoft products like OneNote and Excel. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Sierra. Maybe you or Mr. Trivett, do you see in the future, I don't see a button on here for any cost. Do you see any additional cost associated with the program as the program, obviously you talked about the number of participants in the program. Do you see any costs associated with that's going to be critical to this program continuing?
So currently, we give the patients, as part of this program for heart failure, one of their major goals is maintaining their weight, because as their fluid status changes or their heart doesn't effectively pump out their blood, they start to regurgitate this fluid and they start putting it on. One of the ways that they notice this is through a scale. So a simple scale at home they stand on. The next day they gain 3 pounds overnight. Well, that's a huge indicator and a red flag for us that they need to change something to keep them out of the hospital. Right now that is all being provided by Riverside. Their foundation has provided little kits for them with educational material, the scale, as well as some other items. We don't have any contribution to that cost. We do have some like marketing, like brochures and little items and stuff like that, but outside of that, there's not really any major costs associated with that program.
I think that, Vice Mayor, Barbara, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we receive a grant for the vast majority of our overall costs, including staff time and supplies for this program from the Williamsburg Health Foundation. In years past, we were worried that they might shift that funding away, but I think they're pretty satisfied with the outcomes that we've delivered, and I think they recognize that this is the future of service delivery in this area. So I anticipate that that grant will continue to come as long as we continue to deliver the results that Sierra produces.
Awesome, thank you.
But I think in general, and there are greater cost savings
Right.
from running, the medic unit and staff and fire engines and all that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
great idea, whoever came up with it.
Yeah, thanks, Sierra, for all you're doing in your team. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're seeing it reducing the number of EMS calls and police calls?
So, for example, we have one female who is very well known to the police department. She calls them pretty regularly, most of the time for psychiatric related challenges. In my personal opinion, a lot of it seems to be communication or just comfort community with people, not having a lot of access to resources, and she was utilizing the only resource that she knew of, which was the police department. They referred her to me, and since then, she no longer has a tally board at the police department of how many times she calls, because she has greatly reduced her numbers. Instead, she calls me on my cell phone or one of the human resources or human services employees, but that's okay. She's totally fine to talk to, and that's what this program is about, is helping them get attached to the resources that they need. And she has commented on how much better, she feels now, and she doesn't need it, as well as the officers have spoken to how much they feel that she's no longer overutilizing their resources. So. And
then speaking to the Williamsburg Health Foundation, we know that their strategic plan is to integrate the, mental and acute care.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can get an agency that's doing both of that, isn't that going to be really helpful for you in terms of referrals?
Yeah, absolutely. So one area of weakness in our healthcare system in general is obviously mental health, and there's a lot of other factors that are associated with that, but that has proven to be a challenge for me in my time doing mobile integrated health, is I have all of these other options and places to connect people or resources to provide them with, but with mental health it seems to be a little bit lacking. But I'm looking forward to having Colonial Behavioral Health on our team, because in my conversations with some of their case managers on calls and stuff, there's actually a lot more resources available to patients and the community that we're not necessarily aware of. And so I'm really looking forward to that opportunity.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the presentation, and just one question. You were recounting the story of this individual who had graduated. Now, will you all continue to keep tabs on this person every now and then, or what's sort of the schedule for?
So the program is specifically set for 30 days. It can obviously be extended if necessary. Our goal is to get them fully able to take care of themselves and improved within that 30 days, and then they maintain a regular visit with their cardiologist. However, I always, whenever I graduate somebody from the MIH program, I always tell them, you have my number, you have my card, you know where I am, you can call me at any time, I'm always here for you. So they're officially graduated, but in my eyes, they're still my patients forever.
So we still keep a relationship with them?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
No questions from me. Thanks for covering all you do,
Thank you.
Sierra. True public servant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to move on to engaging with our partners, and we're going to talk about the One Stop, and Wendy Evans is going to come talk about this.
Welcome.
So I'm excited to speak about this initiative. I know Mr. Maslin has definitely kept you informed about this, so I'll just do a brief overview. So as you are aware, this started a few years ago. Our one-stop center, our closest one was in Hampton, and so obviously that's challenging for our city residents who have transportation or other barriers. So we wanted to find a site here in Williamsburg. So we pulled together our partner agencies and Thomas Nelson and identified a site at the Thomas Nelson Historic Campus on Opportunity Way in Williamsburg in James City County. So we had a lot of momentum ready to open, and then the pandemic hit, so we had to put a pause on the project. So, but I'm happy to report that October 7th was our ribbon cutting and opening of the site. So now Virginia CareerWorks has a dedicated room on that campus. They've hired a career specialist. There's been some turnover, so now they're trying to fill that position again. And so we're trying to help them fill that position to staff the center so people can walk in, make appointments. They have 3 computer lab or computer setups there, so help people do resumes, applications, job search, or even explore the other Virginia CareerWorks programs. So our partner agencies rotate staffing there. So our social services, human services staff are there on Tuesdays, and so we work with York and James City. So our staff are there every 3rd Tuesday. So tomorrow we'll have a staff member there to answer any questions about social services programs or our programming or connect to resources for anyone that walks in or needs that assistance. And so we have also, our human services have moved our customer service academy to the site. So we're utilizing classroom space there at Thomas Nelson. Our customer service academy is a month-long program. And at the end, participants get 8 continuing education credits, which is great on their resume and when they're seeking employment. So we had a class there in September, and we plan to have our January class up there at that site too. Again, just bringing more people to the site. So I mean, it's available for Thomas Nelson students, but also anyone in the community. So we want to increase that traffic there. And so we look forward to hosting events and other opportunities at the site, and just be creative in what we can do there. So it's completed, but it's ongoing, of course, because we'll continue to staff that and develop new programs up there. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Mr. Maslin?
No, this has been great work, and thanks for you, and especially your other agencies you work with in James City County, York County. And then last month, we actually opened up a career center in Newport News for veterans, which is really great. So we've got this, within 30 minutes of each other, this efforts. The other thing, in terms of the seminars you're putting on, the classes you're putting on, that may lead directly into, further discussions about the Hospitality Institute. So that's good in terms of that work you're doing
That
there.
would be a good resource, yeah,
Yeah.
to, good connection.
Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you for the quick update, Wendy. I have no questions about the One Stop Workforce Center. I had one on homelessness intervention. Is that one that we will plan to cover yet, or is it okay if you're overseeing that project to briefly hear about an update now?
That's not one that's on our list to talk about, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
I was just curious for an update at the moment. I don't mean to derail the conversation, but it was one I was going to ask about. I assume
Yeah,
you were
sure.
overseeing it.
Yeah, I've been meeting with some community partners and discussing, filling that continuum of service for homeless intervention. I'll tell you that where we're stuck is that we need staff. So we've had a social work position out there since August, trying to hire someone to then start this pilot and do more homeless intervention, but we still need a candidate. So we are recruiting anyone with a social work background to come on board so that we can have the staff to implement the pilot and other programs.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the update.
Yeah, so oh, no. Oh, okay. Well, here's another one about the hiring staff to do the youth programming. That's also, we're waiting to hire staff so that we can put on the programming. Oh, there it is, number 6.
Okay, well,
Do you
thank
have
you.
any other questions?
It was just for the update.
Okay.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
No other question? Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming forward.
Mark's just proving that it does exist.
It does. It makes me feel better. I was like, where is it? Okay, the last one we're going to talk about is it's actually the last two that we're going to talk about is under Connecting with the World. And it's going to be the College Woods Multi-Use Trail as well as the Boat Trail. Mr. Small is going to talk about them both. We're going to do a lot of switching between this and maps and such. So I'll let Mr. Small have it.
Over and flip up 2 slides. 2 slides, right there. This is a map that we had recently drawn up because last month, as you recall, at a prior council meeting, we had requested your endorsement to apply for funding for this segment. This is the map showing kind of the concept design for that trail. This runs from at the south end on the top map is at Berkeley Lane, and this runs north along John Tyler Lane up to John Tyler Highway, where it then ties into Strawberry Plains Road and continues north up past the Strawberry Plains neighborhood, and then eventually ends at Berkeley Middle School. That's where it connects to another wide, 10-foot wide path until it connects up to the Monticello Trail that we recently completed. I call this phase 2 of College Woods Circuit because I'm thinking of College Woods phase 1 was the Monticello shared use trail. And so eventually this trail will go all the way around the South College Woods areas, so hence the name. We've recently applied for the funding for this for FY23, and so hopefully we'll know before our city budgets in May where that stands. And then we can get started on that. This is similar as federal dollars on this project, 80%. So they would pay for, of the $2.77 million, it would be $1,821,920 of that would be the federal dollars, and then $480 for the local match for that. So if awarded, it would start in July 2023, and that's a 3-year process. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to come back to that. The next project, if you want to flip back to your schedules. Mark. It's okay. You're getting there. This has to do with the Birthplace of America Trail, and the reason we're kind of tailoring these two things together is because they actually do overlap. And so what I'd like to show you next is, you can flip back, is go back to slide here. This kind of shows an overview map of the project. The purple bluish line is the Monticello Trail. Green represents a trail system of the current bike lanes down Richmond Road. And that extends all the way from Monticello Avenue to College Corner. And that kind of varies because it's also shared use, shared lanes with the Sharrows markings as well as traditional bike lanes. That could be reconfigured let down the road, but it would require some major reconfiguration of the striping, and we might lose some parking along that area. So that's kind of a future, if we want to make it a little more safer and convenient for users. The next section is the red section, and from Ucrops Way all the way down to the kind of to the east and then to the south along the Carter's Grove Country Road and South England Street. That is the portion of the project that's also part of the boat trail, the Birthplace of America Trail. So a couple of things I wanted to point out along the red section, which is the future, is at John Tyler Lane, you see a connection kind of going off and across Route 199. That's a project I've been working with VDOT, is conducting a project pipeline study for the Route 199 corridor between that intersection and Brookwood Drive, and they're including the intersection of John Tyler Lane. The major project is to coordinate for traffic congestion relief through that section, and you all know that is an issue. And so it's to generate a study to determine potential solutions for alleviating that traffic congestion. But as part of that project, we want to make sure, and we're coordinating with James City County on this, that we have adequate pedestrian and bicycle crossings at that intersection. Because it is a kind of a dangerous place for bicycles to try to cross, even though it's signalized right now. We would also maintain the current pedestrian and crossings at the Jamestown Road intersection. So that's kind of some future projects coming along. The next, we're also going to be working along the Carter's Grove Country Road and further on out, is to working with Colonial Williamsburg and James City County on future funding for those segments between South Boundary Street and to South England and the Carter's Grove Country Road, and that'll take us all the way out to Below Flats Road, way out in James City County. So we've got some partners that we need to work with on to get those funded as well. If you can back up or go forward 2 slides. You've got that. Oh, I do. Thank you. The next segment I wanted to kind of bring to your attention is the call it Phase 3. Which is actually broken into 3 sections here of the boat trail or of the combined Collegewood Circuit and boat trail. Is this would take us from John Tyler Lane near Berkeley Lane all the way down to Jamestown Road. That's section 1. Section 2 is down up to Jamestown Road across the dam at Lake Matoka and to Ucrops Way. From Ucrop Way, it would then be part of the boat trail, and that would take it all the way into College Corner at South Boundary Street. So this has actually been applied for funding. HRPDC on our behalf has applied for a federal RAISE grant. If you remember, the RAISE grant is just another term, used to be called the BUILD grant, and before that it was Tiger grants. And so this is federal funds that get distributed among the states for various and sundry projects, usually pretty large dollar projects. But they've submitted a request for the 2 miles that runs this whole section, a little over 2 miles, would be $3.47 million. Now, a lot of the section of what we're proposing along Jamestown Road in Section 2 is not a widening or an additional trail on the side, but it might be a narrowing or potentially restriping of the four-lane road to allow for an additional trails along that section. So those are still in concept, but they have applied for some of those funds. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Mayor, any questions? Maslin?
Aaron, just a question about the existing bike, the green bike path at Monticello.
Yes.
Are there any more, like, in terms of signage that needs to come to make that usable? Because I don't see many people using it. It's one of the few we've got, two directions on a bike path.
Well, one of the things, I see people using it all the time when I drive along it, but I'm also a daily commuter through that area. One of the things we have talked about doing is putting down some arrows so that we can delineate, especially at the beginning of the lanes and where it crosses at the intersections, to kind of indicate, hey, there's two directions here, that it is a bi-directional bike lane. We would also put some additional paint downs to kind of show that this is intended for bicycles.
Right. So it's obvious to the cars, they're not going over there.
That's right. That's to make sure not only that we keep the cars out, but, also the joggers need to be up on the pedestrian accommodation, as opposed to using the green bike lanes. So.
Thank you.
And the only, thank you, Aaron. It's really exciting to sort of visualize this. And isn't part of the little connection there at 5 isn't that planned to connect with Capitol Trail?
Eventually, James City County's looking at figuring out something to get from this point. That'll eventually run down Route 5 out to Five Forks, where it can connect to the trail system at Clarebird Baker Elementary in that area. And so that's kind of their intent. That is a difficult section, and they recognize that that's going to be a challenge for them. So,
I think the exciting piece of this is that we're showing you here a lot of connectivity throughout the city, and there could be a couple different ways we connect to the Cap Trail. So even though that green section is Sharrows in an on-road bike lane, I ride it all the time. It's people who are used to urban cycling that works for them. So it's really cool that we can finish our pieces and be ready from both directions to connect to the boat trail and the Cap Trail.
yeah, the boat trail on the, call it in the, on the left side, the west side in the James City County section, we would actually connect to the boat trail up at Berkeley Middle School. The preferred alignment is down Ironbound Road, the old section of Ironbound Road, for the boat trail there. Then it comes down our Monticello Shared Use Trail up to Compton Drive, and then it cuts through William and Mary over to Ucrop Way. And then so our section of the boat trail is from Ucrop Way along Jamestown Road, somehow getting over to South England Street, and then working its way down to connect and eventually to the Carters Grove Country Road.
And the final destination for the boat trail is Fort Monroe.
Fort Monroe.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, via Yorktown.
Oh, Yorktown.
And also in the other direction to First Landing in Virginia Beach if you cross the ferry.
Yeah, there's also other sections, the south side Hampton Roads Trail would also be through Suffolk and Isle of Wight, and you could eventually catch the ferry across to connect to the Capitol Trail.
Or swim it.
Variety's the spice of life, so.
Exactly. I mean, it'll eventually
have
be
options.
a long, long loop.
Yes. Might take me 3 days, but
Exactly.
thank you.
Thanks for the presentation, Aaron, and nothing from me. I'm familiar with some of those areas and having done a fair amount of biking months ago. Route 5, Compton, those will be difficult to convert. The cars certainly can get speedy on them, but it's exciting to know where we are now. So, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Appreciate that.
So that's the conclusion of what we wanted to show you. The dashboards, we hope to bring them back to you here in your next meeting's in January. Once that's done, then all of the information will be out there available to you and the public as well.
Well, I'm pleased to see that we are making, I think, what I consider to be significant progress on our GIOs, moving right along. I know they're never easy. There's always a lot to have accomplished, and you are certainly doing a good job in kind of fulfilling council's vision for that. So thank you very much. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so that
I'm
takes
sorry,
us.
Doug, I had one more.
Yes, sir.
To ask about. My apologies for not doing it before. Michelle, the work group of department heads and city staff members that are questioning our next environmental ladder, this tree hugger's curious to hear about it.
I only heard part of that. I'm sorry, Councilman Rush. I think you're asking about the environmental sustainability study? Yes, so that has started. We've gathered a lot of information from William and Mary, from James City County, and also from University of Virginia and Albemarle and Charlottesville, who are in a partnership as well. Another thing that's exciting that we're looking into is the William and Mary Law School here has an assessment, and they're looking for a city to test that with. So we need to look at that a little more closely and then bring those options to you. So we're working on that.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to city council communications. Does anybody have anything to share from their liaison activity?
It wasn't an official appointment, but I'll share it just because we touched on it earlier. The Heritage Trail that we mentioned, it said it would connect to the MLK Memorial, and that process, along with a great amount of help from Judge Brian Smalls and a number of community individuals, is going well. The Williamsburg Community Foundation has been willing to host a website for our fundraising efforts. So that's something that should launch in the new year, and we're currently in the process of reaching out to some of the families of the members who, well, the people who will be recognized on that memorial. We're reaching out to some of their families just with a congratulatory remark. So that's an update from that memorial.
Okay, so you will have the scheduled meetings. I hope you'll appreciate this new format of providing it on the agenda. I think it's helpful for everybody to see it, and saves us from listening to the city manager a little bit. Okay, any questions on the schedule? No? So that takes us to open forum. See anybody from the community here, but for Bobby. That's what I was going to say. So, Bobby, would you like to come forward? Thank you. So we'll close the open forum, and believe we have a matter for closed session.
We do. I move to go into closed session pursuant to section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning appointments to boards and commissions.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll go into closed session and reconvene shortly.